Hello everyone, Redbeard here back at it again, and today we have part 2 of my possible, now more missing units for the Warriors of Chaos roster, but also for the Mono Gods. Now, this video will be dedicated to exalted champions that could come as units. This would be in the form of unique variants of aspiring champions, possibly chosen, or types of cavalry. For chosen Mono God variants, we may just see the models with different names, but for aspiring champion Mono God variants to be properly implemented, they will need a whole unit with unique animations and models, which would count for DLC or FLC units, which is why I think they could come in the future, whereas the chosen would just be free with the update. Now, as I've said before, if we exclude any units from the End Times, Age of Sigmar, a creative imagination, or anything else outside of Warhammer fantasy proper, the Mono God rosters are basically complete. Besides, all the marked Warriors of Chaos units we already know are coming, so for future content, we have to pull new units in from the aforementioned sources. They've already pulled Age of Sigmar models for the Greater Demons and what is more or less a 40k model in the Soul Grinders. I think there are people who act like Age of Sigmar or other outside sources of fantasy are garlic to their vampire cold hearts when talking about Total War Warhammer. Perhaps we will see a Total War Age of Sigmar game in the future, but I honestly don't think it would be as good as this combined series, and I would like to see Total War Warhammer 3 become all it can be. So again, all you fantasy purist vampires, I think in order to have future content for the Mono Gods, you know, the major headlining race of Game 3, we need End Times and Age of Sigmar units, so start building up that garlic immunity. Other races don't necessarily need the sources to add to their roster, but the Demons of Chaos do. I lead into this video with that because basically all of these models, names, units are from End Times or Age of Sigmar. Perhaps to be more fantasy friendly, they will take the models for the units, but just keep Chosen of Nurgle, or Aspiring Champions of Nurgle as the name, though they would have the models of Putrid Blightkings per se. Perhaps a Chaos Lord of Slaanesh instead of a Lord of Pain. So for the aspiring champions in the Undivided roster, we know they are finally getting reworked to act more like monstrous infantry. All these variants of aspiring champions would have probably 6 to 16 entities per unit, unless they're mounted, in which, you know, cut that maybe into a quarter or half. They could tailor the number of entities in these units of aspiring champions to the sacred number of each god. 6 for Slaanesh, 7 for Nurgle, 8 for Khorne, 9 for tzeentch. In this video, I'm going to consider that they're probably going to keep it at 16 entities, maybe dropping down a little bit to 10 or 12, depending on the power of the unit. So as I said, for the Mono God variants, though, they need a step further with unique models and animations, so let's get into that. So for Nurgle, for aspiring champions, we could see Putrid Blightkings. The PB have so many unique models, it would honestly be a shame if there were only one unit. We could use different models as aspiring champions, or mounted variants, and even for lords and heroes. The Putrid Blightkings, also known as the Exalted Champions of Nurgle, are not one particular tribe or group, but rather a loose brotherhood that spans the northernmost regions of the world. Each of their number has been touched by Nurgle via his earthly emissaries, specifically the demon flies that have hatched from within Chaos Champion Blow-Brotspawned, ever since the Lord of Decay claimed the sorcerer as a host for his tiny servants. Whilst Blow-Brotspawn sleeps, his many parasites whisper and scheme inside his sack-like gut, talking of those warriors abroad in the world who deserve the favor of the Lord of Decay. When one such champion has proven himself beyond a doubt, a single demon fly will take it upon itself to wind its way out of Blob's snoring mouth and flit erratically into the night sky, so begins the tiny messenger's long journey. But it is not one without aid. As the demon fly buzzes across the moonlit landscape, the sick light of more sleep enriches and invigorates it, filling the tiny creature with the energies of chaos. Drawn to its quarry by a silver thread of fate, the fly will journey across half the world if necessary before alighting gently on the head of its target and sinking in its mandibles into the flesh. A demon kiss from Nurgle himself that transfers great physical strength and resilience. From that point on, the fly-touched warrior finds himself completely in tune to the desires of Grandfather Nurgle, a ready-made bodyguard for the Father's champions, and a deadly force of destruction in his own right. Though such individuals tend to band together and hence are usually encountered in war bands or tight-knit military groups, each of the Blightkings is deadly in his own right, a champion in the making who is fully prepared to fight and die for his vile god's cause. Many and varied are the weapons with which these blessed few perpetuate the cycle of life and death. They range from those which typically typify the tribes of the north, such as bone-crushing flails and flesh-hewing axes, to far stranger tools of destruction that echo the proclivities of their patron. Some of their number boast insectile appendages, others battle scythes or staffs that carry massive verdigris-stained bells, each clanging out a sonorous death toll as its wielder caves in the skulls and rib cages of his foes. All champions of chaos hope the eyes of their gods stare down upon them whilst they go about their violent work. With the Putrid Blightkings, it is all but certain. They are fully aware that their lord has not only selected them individually for glory, but also passed a little of his boundless strength onto them so that they might fulfill the destiny apportioned to them. These are the slayers of monarchs and monsters, the bane of judges and priests. They exist to bring the mighty low so that the meek might devour them, hatching 1,000 minor lives from every major kill. In this way, Nurgle's largesse continues its eternal cycle, forever breaking down the edifices and edicts of civilization and replacing them with the teeming wilderness of unbound life. The first of the Chaos worshippers to feel the touch of Nurgle's insectoid messengers were the Chaos warriors that garrisoned Brass Keep, having fought their way deep into the Empire at the vanguard of Undrkul's invasion. The Repugnauts had already made a name for themselves by committing acts of bloody desecration in the name of Nurgle wherever they went. They were part of the besieging army that assailed the titanic Brass Keep, for the fortress had changed hands many times over the years, and had proved an indomitable bulwark for both the Empire and its enemies. Though they lost the greater part of their number to Empire sorties and the cannon fire from Brass Keep's walls, the Repugnauts were finally able to break the fortress when they invoked Nurgle's favor to pollute the stone of the castle itself, and hence infect the greater part of its defenders. They took the fortress, but the armies of the Emperor finally repelled Undrkul's invasion, and the Repugnauts and their fellow warriors were left defending a staging post that never saw reinforcement. Cut off from the shattered armies of their fellows, the warriors decided to hold the fortress in the Middle Mountains for as long as possible. They reasoned that another Chaos invasion would hack its way into the Empire within a few years, and that when it did, they would be ideally placed to fight at its bloody tip. The months slid past, however, and one by one, the Chaos worshippers that had taken Brass Keep for their own succumbed to the same plague which they had taken the fortress only a few harrowing months before. Only those blessed in the sight of Nurgle survived the sickness, the Repugnauts foremost among them. When the aid of the dark gods came, it was not in the form of a baying horde of bloodthirsty barbarians, but instead as a swarm of droop-legged demon flies. The swarm buzzed down from the overcast skies and into the fort's corridors and cells. There each of the tiny beasts still dripping wet from bathing in the weeping sores that lined Blowbrought Spawn's insides, settled on the guts of the few Chaos warriors left within the keep's walls. Within a matter of days, the Repugnauts grew swollen and fat on the vibrant enemies that hummed through them. Some rotted, some bloated, some changed to resemble the insects that marked them out for the favor of Nurgle and recognition of their boldness. Around them, the keep itself changed, large portions of its walls dripping unclean fluids into the mountainside that surrounded it. By the time the Maggoth riders of Icehorn Peak had reached The fortress, its inhabitants, had been reshaped completely by the polluting power of their patron, a war band of veteran killers with the power of a small army in its own right. Similar stories unfolded from Norska to the northern coast. The demon flies boar of Blobe's gut would swarm out across the lands, settling upon the brows of or abdomens of those that their divine master deemed worthy. The scions of the Lost Plague, long-time allies of the Dragonbone tribe, found their idle appreciation for disease blossom into full-scale obsession as flesh-hardening plagues and bone-twisting fungus blossomed across their physical forms. Less than a moon's turn after their ugly transformations, the scions had fought their way to become the champions of Gutrotspum's armies. Amongst the warriors from the Blightkin's muster-at Fjordling tribe, the most devoted of the triplets' followers found themselves bulge and bulk out as mutations of severity that would have killed lesser men, bestowed strength instead of weakness. Wherever Nurgle's influence would be needed most in the world's spanning struggles that were to come, the Putrid Blightkings were there, bound together not by a formal brotherhood, but by the will and foresight of their disgustingly generous god. For a bit of explanation on that lore, Blowbrot is one of the 3 Maggoth Rider Lords, the other 2 being Orgoth's Demon Spew and Morbidek's Twiceborn. So if you're wondering what they are riding, those are Pox Maggoths, which, yes, are an extremely cool model and a fan favorite. So I do expect to see them as a SEM, also known as a single entity monster unit in the future. It would be weird if they were in the game without the 3 famous riders, though, so I suggest the Maggoth riders roll out with an update to the Nurgle tech tree at some point. They would become unique pseudo-tech legendary lords akin to the Greenskins Rachnic Spiderclaw and Oglok the Horrible, or the Vampire's Admirals. Because they are 3, they would not work in a DLC slotted position. Besides, Nurgle already has a lot of awesome potential legendary characters. I'll try to end this side rant. I will go over that more in another video. For the rest of the lore explanation, the Glotkin are a fan favorite that could come in a Lord pack focused on the mono god Chaos Spawn Lords. The Putrid Blightkings followed those guys, and Gutrotspum and Tamarkon, and could roll out with any of them. So back to the Putrid Blightkings themselves and how they could work in the game. Again, they have so many models. Besides what I already mentioned, you could even give them weapon variants in the Chosen or the Aspiring Champions, like additional hand weapons and shields, spears, scythes, and great weapons. We could see mounted variants on Rotflies or Putrid Slugs being a possible Nurgle unit or mount that could act like something between a Morngull, a Tomb Scorpion, and a Beast of Nurgle, but I'll save that for a later video. We could see a hero variant with this bell, which you could hear audibly over the field of battle, which would be ominous, loreful, and just super cool for the Nurgle roster. Perhaps we could see them mounted on a chariot and a Lord variant called the Pusgoyle Blight Lord. Additionally, there is a named ROR readily available in the Repugnauts, who were the first Putrid Blightkings who came to fight the Empire out of the Brass Keep in the Middle Mountains, where Festus now enjoys his start position. Putrid Blightkings are enormous bloated warriors festering with pustules and plagues, and some of Nurgle's most favored mortal servants. These rotting bellicose murderers, blessed with the bite of demon fly, lumber into battle with their toxins tolling. They are led by Blight Lords, blessed with greater resilience, and supported by Icon Bearer and sonorous toxins. Blightkings have rotting bodies that can absorb tremendous amounts of punishment, allowing them to relentlessly push through a foe's battle line. Their bodies can also release virulent discharges that heals those aligned with Nurgle and infects with dangerous illnesses those that don't. They wield with a shockingly deceptive skill and speed a variety of filth or slime-encrusted blighted weapons like scythes, mauls, axes, and flails into battle. The Icon Bearers wield the blighted icons of Nurgle into battle, inspiring other Putrid Blightkings into fighting harder for their lord. Musicians play gigantic bells known as sonorous toxins, which are tolled to announce their charge. I have made stat cards and formulated out the abilities, strengths, and weaknesses of the units I will be covering today. If any of you have watched my Archaon video, then you know by looking at this I've figured out how to use Microsoft Paint since then. I will probably be making these sort of images in the future when talking about possible units and I may make a follow-up to this follow-up of my monsters video where I make stat cards of the monsters and give a better visual aid to the abilities they may have based off lore and the abilities that exist already in the game. All of the units are based off the new stats of aspiring champions and then branch off using lore and other existing units that make sense. Probably all of these units should have some sort of cap, as I've imagined them they will be late game ultimate units for each roster. They would unlock either at tier 4 or 5 depending on the unit, may get +1 or +2 slots for recruitment depending on the unit. They may want to implement them differently, in which case they might be slightly overtuned. So first we have the regular variant, Putrid Blightkings, Sword and Shield. I really like them because of the Tri-Shield. I hope at least one of the models we get to see in the game gets that Nurgle Tri-Shield. Nurgle loves, well, also you'll see in these stats that Nurgle, he loves the number 3. Often things come in 3 with Nurgle, but his sacred number is 7. So you'll see that number popping up a lot in these stats and whatnot. Armor, well, so for these guys, they would be monstrous infantry, armored and shielded. They'd have regeneration, poison attacks, armor piercing, and a unique ability called Virulent Discharge, which would basically give them the Locus of Contagion and the Locus of Fecundity abilities that the Plague Ridden have. They might, now this might be very powerful, again, if we wanted to nerf something here, make them lesser versions. So maybe, damage per second would be like 33 to 66 in the Locus of Contagion. Whereas in the Locus of Fecundity, maybe it heals 0.4 per second instead of 0.8. Number of entities, 14. It's 7 times 2. So that's where I got that. And having a little less than 16 entities, which the aspiring champions are at, would probably be good because these guys are going to be kind of like the size of, or a little smaller than Ogre Man-Eaters. 10,000 health around there is good. Again, the regular aspiring champions are at 7,800. So, I mean, Nurgle should be way above. Oh, also, for the foot variants of Putrid Blightkings, I used Plague Bearers as my main Plague Bearers and aspiring champions, and lore, obviously, to figure out what their stats would be. Yeah, armor 100, silver shield, leadership 80, speed 30, 43 melee attack, magic, poison, melee defense 53, weapon strength 113, with armor piercing, charge bonus 23. You look at the abilities, we got encourage, hide in the forest, regeneration, siege attacker causes fear, and then lastly, they would have Cloud of Flies like other Nurgle characters, but it would, because it, the whole thing is they become Putrid Blightkings because the flies, the demon flies, not just regular flies, demon flies that inhabit them. So they would also have that an upgraded version of it, basically, that gives them plus 15 melee defense instead of 9. Then quickly going through the other variants that we could see. Great weapon variant, mostly the same, just gets splash damage with the big weapons, more armor piercing, a little more weapon strength and charge bonus, less melee defense, more melee attack, no shield, obviously, still at 10,000 health, and then everything else is the same. I love these guys. The scythes just making big splash damage, I think these guys would be really cool. And then we'll go on to the dual weapon variant, which is probably the least likely variant, but it's possible. Obviously there's models for it, as you can see. This variant would have middling weapon strength compared to the other two, but would get some anti-infantry. Would have pretty low melee defense as far as the units we're talking about today, but high melee attack, obviously. Otherwise, again, same as the other units I already talked about. But finally, we have the Pusgoyle Blightords, which are a super variant, basically. So the other variants, I think, would get +2 every, like, tier 5 of the building they would come in. Whereas the Pusgoyle Blightords would get +1. Now, they would still have Encourage. They'd get Flying, causes terror as well. Basically, I compared these guys a little more with Plague Drones and the Knights of Torgaval from Tor Yerves, Altharian's Mistwalker super unit. So basically I looked at, again, Plague Drones, Knights of Torgaval, and then, well, the Putrid Blightkings stats I already made. Knights of Torgaval are at 11,400 something health. So that's why we're getting up to 13,377. Again, like I said, lots of 3s and 7s. Splash damage like the Great Weapon variants. On foot wood, so the Knights of Torgaval have like 300 weapon strength. So these guys, being Nurglites, would be higher than that. They'd have 373, or around that. These are all just approximates. I cannot say exactly how they would play in game. I can't actually test them. But yeah, Pusgoyle Blightords, yeah, 3 units, because, comes in 3s, it's Nurgle. Knights of Torgaval have 4. And then, yeah, you get, again, as I'm going through these stat cards, I'm just going to try to briefly explain and get through them, and just so there's more context to what you're seeing. But definitely, if you want to look through it a little more, I would either screenshot or just pause it and look through it at your own leisure. So for our honorable mentions for Nurgle, we have the Rot Knights. So in Tabletop 8th edition, I believe you could bring Chaos Knights of Nurgle and upgrade them to ride Rot Beasts. So Rot Beasts are basically bulls or cows that have heavily been mutated by Nurgle to be filled with rot, miasma, and poison, but they've also kind of mutated to have sharp teeth, so they're almost between a bull and a bear, or a bull and a wolf in their form. I could see them coming as as a feral unit of rot beasts, and then again as these Rot Knights. Now the Rot Knights could also take hand weapons or lances. They might both have shields, or maybe only the hand weapon version has shield. Yeah. Kayzk the Befouled was a hero choice for the Warriors of Chaos. So I could see him coming with Tamarkan as a legendary hero. So, quick bit on his lore. Kayzk the Befouled was a Kurgan champion of Chaos who had given much in the service of his god Nurgle, the Lord of Decay. The Befouled has given his flesh, which is now a rotting pestilent mass, robbed of form and feeling. He has given his voice, for his vocal cords are no more than an open wound, and he long ago gave his soul to be the Plague Father's trinket. Kayzk stands as a living, if it can be called such, testament to the full horrors of Nurgle's blessings, earning him the epithet the Befouled by those of the plague god's bleak faith. A mighty chaos champion in his own right, Kayzk came to command his own warband of Kurgan horsemen who followed his path of decay and became known as the Rot Knights for the fetid half-demon beasts they rode into battle. Vile, mutated creatures whose cancerous flesh rapidly wept pus over any wound they sustained, suturing them shut. Kayzk the Befouled was one of the first to flock to Tamarkan's banner, joining with the Maggot Lord in the Chaos Wastes and sweeping down through the lands of the Kurgan at his side. serving as Tamarkon's chief lieutenant and master of his mounted troops. During the Battle of the Black Pit, he is said to have fallen, not to the shot or sword of the Empire's defenders, but in Drazowath's sorcerer's fires as he led the ill-judged attack on the slave encampment to secure flesh sacrifices for his master's dark rites. So for the Rot Knights stats, they would obviously be Monstrous Cavalry, armored, armor-piercing, poison attacks, regeneration. I base them mostly between Chaos Knights, obviously, but also Crushers and Mournfangs, because I think they would be most like those two units, and then just used the Pox Riders or the Toad Riders as a reference. So 12 units sounds about right. They'd be big Monstrous Cavalry, you know, in the ballpark of probably a bit smaller than Mournfang, but bigger than Bears. High health for, you know, it gets a Nurgle unit, so probably in the 9,000 range. Armor probably a bit less than Chaos Knights, because the Rot Beasts themselves wouldn't be armored. Just the warrior mounted upon. But you know, again, the Rot Beasts would be, have regeneration and whatnot. Leadership 73, speed 67. They would probably just be, I mean, they're a Nurgle unit, so they're not going to be the fastest thing in the world. They should be pretty slow as far as cavalry, but pretty fast as far as the Nurgle roster goes. Melee attack 43 with poison, melee defense 37, so definitely can hold their own in melee. Weapon strength 130, this puts them around the weapon strength of Crushers. And at 12 entities, that makes about sense for a Nurgle unit as well. Charge bonus 70. Now again, I did say they might have a hand weapon and a lance variant. I just made the one unit card. This was kind of a afterthought I'm tacking onto the video. Again, just like an honorable mention. Because I would very much like to see Rot Knights, and I think when Tamarkon comes, we'll hopefully see Kayzk the Befouled as a legendary hero for him, and then obviously Rot Knights as a unit that comes that you can upgrade. If you're like doing warband upgrades, you can upgrade your Chaos Knights of Nurgle to Rot Knights. Would have Cloud of Flies, just like any other Nurgle unit. Regeneration, Siege Attacker, causes fear, and yeah, that's about it. They may also have some sort of Miasma of Rot ability. I didn't explore that here, but I may in a future video. I have a lot of stuff planned. I may revisit these guys in a more, in some sort of Nurgle video. But yeah, so I haven't posted anything in about a week. It wasn't my plan, but life is busy, and I've been working on this series of videos that I'll hopefully be dropping one per day for the next week or so, at least the next handful of days, because originally I had all 4 monogods in one video, but that would have been way too long, so I broke it down into 4 parts, this first one being Nurgle. I think tomorrow I'll drop the tzeentch one to ride the hype train for tzeentch with Village's announcement and the Let's Play. Probably after that I'll do Slaanesh, and then after that I'll do Khorne to ride the teaser trailer hype train. But then sometime in there I'm probably gonna do a weekly roundup too, and that's about my plan for the week as far as videos. So I should again have probably one a day coming out, so stay tuned for that. Also hit 100 subscribers, so I'm just like thank you everyone who has clicked that button. And stay tuned, because I got a lot of other stuff planned. Tell your friends, like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, anything you can do to help is very much appreciated. I wish you guys all the luck in the world, and have a good day.